Depending on when you're watching this video, Fable 5 may no longer be included in your Claude subscription, meaning it now takes up usage credits, making it really expensive. In fact, twice as expensive as Opus 4.8. But there is a way to massively reduce the cost. People like Theo, Kun Chen, and Matt Berman have figured out a model routing technique that allows Fable 5 to use a much cheaper model for certain tasks instead of running things end-to-end on its own. So let's go through how I've adopted that technique and created certain skills to make the whole thing easier. Using a powerful model like Fable for routing and orchestration is not a new technique. I mean, Anthropic went through exactly how to do it in detail in this article last year. But we've got to the point now where there are so many cheaper models than Claude ones that are very good at writing code. Like GPT 5.5, which has performance similar to Opus, but is a fraction of the cost, and GLM 5.2, which also has great benchmarks and is even cheaper. So it only makes sense that people are starting to delegate tasks to cheaper models even in different harnesses. Theo went through a great deep dive on how he does it, so has Kun Chen, and I've looked at both of their approaches, ran them on a few different models, and taken the best parts to put something together that I think works well. And if this interests you, make sure you hit the subscribe button to get more of this kind of content. But before we get into model routing, we need to explain one thing that is the foundation for this whole technique, and it's effort level. Here is a graph from DeepSuite, a very good benchmark for testing how good models are at coding. And we're comparing two different models here, so Fable 5 and Opus 4.8. Now we can see here that Fable 5 on low is actually better than Opus 4.8 on max when it comes to efficiency, and it's way cheaper. We can also see that there's not a massive difference between Fable 5 Max and Fable 5X High. In fact, it's better to have a max of Fable 5 on High because it's cheap and really efficient, and you could even have Fable 5 on Medium or Low when it comes to keeping costs down and setting an effort level for your Fable 5 orchestrator. Okay, so with effort level out of the way, let's now move on to model routing. So the idea is simple. Start off with Claude Code on a clever model like Fable or Opus, and then trigger the ability to call a cheaper model on a different harness using a skill I've named delegate. Now, the reason I've used a skill instead of putting it inside my global Claude MD is because sometimes I may want to run the clever model, so Fable, end-to-end on a specific task, and adding a skill allows me to control whether to delegate or not. The skill itself contains the Theo style table, with taste being used for UI or front-end specific tasks, so the model should choose Opus for that since it's the best at front-end design. But aside from that, all of these values are my own. Beneath that, I have some routing rules specific to my use case, and then the way the skill invokes the other models is quite interesting. So here it makes use of another skill like the GLM runner or the codex runner, which basically spins up Haiku in a sub-agent as a courier, which then runs a bash command with the harness and specific model. The reason I've done it this way is so that Haiku can manage the bash calls that are being made instead of Fable running the bash calls directly, so it's easier to visualize everything going on. Now, I don't have to use Haiku, I could use Sonnet to do a similar thing. I've just found Haiku to be a bit cheaper for this sort of action. Now, each sub-agent is run using a bash call, so OpenCode for GLM, Codex for GPT 5.5, and the Cursor CLI for Composer. So to test it, I can ask it to do research to find out what people are saying about Fable 5 pricing using GPT 5.5. I'll tell you why I've forced it to use GPT-5 later on in the video, but we can see it triggers the Codex runner skill, which we can use to see the exact prompt that was given to Codex by Fable. And now that it's finished, we can see all the results that it gets from its search using Codex. We get information about the fact that it burns tokens really quickly, about the real cost of a task, the two-tier access, and so much more. And we can see here that it only used up 7% of my usage. And note, this is on the Pro plan. So if you're on the Max 5X or Max 20X plan, you'd have more usage. And essentially, I could run this search over and over again around 13 or 14 times before hitting my limit. We can even go through the specific Codex session to see exactly what it did. And over here, we can see it used Firecrawl for some of its search. And if we keep scrolling, we can get an idea of exactly how deep the search was. So to get all of that data taking up just 7% of Fable 5 on the Pro plan is very impressive. Let's see what else it can do. Here is a fairly complex PR for a project I've been working on that gives it the ability to change the depth of field of a video or image using AI. So instead of getting Fable 5 to review the whole thing, I'm going to again use my delegate skill, but this is a slightly tweaked review version of that skill, which uses my original delegate skill behind the scenes, but runs the PR through 8 different angles. I'll have a link to this skill in the description if you want to read exactly how it works. So if I let Claude Code go to work, it loads up the delegate skill and then launches 8 different sub-agents using different models and harnesses, giving them each a different prompt. And after it's finished, you can see we get a very comprehensive review of the PR with all of its findings from the different models. And if we scroll up a bit, we can see what models were used. So GLM over here, GPT here, another GPT, and we even have a Claude model. And take a look at the usage. It's only 53%. So for that detailed, in-depth PR review, it only took about 40% of our usage using Fable 5 on medium effort level, which is insane. But I will admit there are some issues with this method. So because it opens up different harnesses, there is some overhead when it comes to that, and also juggling different sub-agents. So you can see here, it took 10 minutes for this agent to finish, 13 minutes for this one, and we can see some agents took around 18 minutes. If the whole thing was done end-to-end by Fable, it would be a lot quicker, but it would be way more expensive. Now, I don't expect my skill and the way I do things to work for you out of the box. I also know I'm in a privileged position to have a bunch of access to subscriptions to test these models out. So go ahead and adapt the skill to your needs and also use the models that work for you or the ones you already have subscriptions for. And if you're wondering why I use GPT 5.5 each time, well, I ran a bunch of evals with different types of tests, and overall it had the best results. But personally, I find GLM to be very good at creative writing and Composer to be a very fast model. Check out the link in the description if you want to see the results to my evals. But overall, I hope this gives you some ideas and techniques on how to use Fable 5 for kind of cheap, even on usage credits. And if you want to try out the demos using Firecrawl yourself, then you can use this code to get 500 extra credits. Finally, check out the next video if you want to see how I created a Firecrawl monitor just to keep track of Fable news. Yep, I did actually do that.